And just like that, Auburn may be in it for another elite wide receiver.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Joining me as he does every week for a little Recruiting Thursday action is the Brian Smith. He hosts The Portal, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your twice daily show about recruiting, transfer portal, NIL, all of that stuff. Brian, thanks for your time. As always, we'll talk about several big names, including a conversation that you had with Deuce Knight and Cam Coleman later in the show. But let's start things off with Messiah Hampton. So it sounds like a 7-on-7 group visited Auburn last week. Messiah Hampton, part of that group, and you talked to him, and some of his answers intrigued you.
Yeah, Messiah plays with 24K, which is based out of Orlando, but Messiah is from Albany, New York. So it's definitely a national 7-on-7 program, and they stopped at Auburn. They were going to Bama.
4-star receiver. Just to make sure everybody knows who we're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, he's a big-time player, and he's got offers from Ohio State and Oregon and Southern Cal and Miami and Notre Dame. And Clemente and I were there, Christian Clemente from 24/7, and he asked before I did, he's like, hey, did they offer you too late? Because they offered him, and he came downstairs and we interviewed. And he said, no, it's never too late. And I was like, oh, because I had a couple of questions about that too, and Christian beat me to it. And he said, I'm going to take an OB to Auburn. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that was surprising. And he just said he just really liked it, the way they treated him, the coaches and everything. And to be very clear, this is a guy that is an advanced route runner and has strong hands. He looks like he's college ready. He's a workout nut. He's a top 100 recruit. So all this stuff about Auburn struggling at receiver from a couple of years ago has flip-flopped and gone the other direction in the Tigers' favor. And if they could land this kid, it would just add to it. I mean, they're off to another good start, Zach, with wide receiver recruiting this year. Yeah. And this is a kid you can play boundary, slot, outside. He's a jack of all trades, but he's just really advanced for his age.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're hearing the same stuff. You heard commits talking about it when they went to practice over the weekend, and then Q Freeze at his presser earlier this week, just talking about, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he talked about how this receiver room rivals the one he had at Ole Miss with A.J. Brown and, all of those guys. He thinks it rivals it. They've got to step up and deliver, but it rivals it. And you and I were having these conversations a year ago where it's like, okay, how do you turn the tide? But now it seems like receivers, despite Auburn not really scoring a whole lot of points yet, they're listening. They're listening to what Auburn has to say.
I think it's partially the coaches because they've worked hard. And I think the other part is they played young players this past year and they had success. It's one thing to say you're going to play young guys, but Cam was starting. And, Simmons was playing a lot. And, everybody got to play. That's not normal. Coaches always promise playing time, but they're not going to put a guy out there that's not ready too. So it's kind of a 6 one way, half dozen the other. I think that they're just telling the truth, which I think a lot of guys also respect. Like, hey, Cam earned this. That's why he played a lot. That's why he was scoring touchdowns. He didn't take his talent for granted anywhere in the system in the playbook. So I'm sure they understand that. And I also think that it's still SEC. That part of it sells. And there's playing time still available because the depth chart is just now finally getting to a point where it's normal again if you're going to be a big-time SEC school. So there's a chance to push the pile that way too. Auburn's in a pretty good spot at wide receiver.
Where does Deuce fit into that recruiting pitch, you think?
Well, he was downstairs and with Cam when we were there, and I was talking to both of them, but Deuce is an easy pitch because the kids get to see him. They don't even have to say anything. That's why you bring recruits in for practices, and especially when you have an opportunity for scrimmages. Yeah, I was told that he had a couple of bombs that went really well, and they put him on the money, one to Cam, et cetera. And it's just like, if you're going to throw the ball down the field, there's a lot of high risk with it. Usually freshmen aren't very good. I was told he's way more advanced than they kind of thought he would be. That was one person's opinion. I don't know how much you would have put into that, but he's advanced quicker. And he's also taken his time very seriously. He went from 202 to 200 and I believe he said 18 or 16 pounds already, and that's just in a couple of months. So that's a good sign, and that's something he'll be able to tell kids about. But everything about him would make you think, hey, I'm going to get the ball. He's a nice guy. He's easy to walk up to a kid and talk to him. Dude's pretty chill.
Yeah.
I would imagine that's really going to help your program because some quarterbacks aren't very approachable. That's not the way Deuce is at all.
Yeah, sure. No, I've heard similar things. So the conversation you had with Deuce and Cam, was it just pretty much like, hey, the offense seems to be pretty explosive by all accounts throughout the offseason so far?
Well, I asked Cam first before Deuce walked over. I said, how's it going? Who's playing and this and that, just got small talk. And I said, quarterbacks, and Deuce's name came up and he said he was doing really well. And Cam's always been very blunt with me.
Sure.
And it was just guys talking in a circle kind of thing, but he seemed very comfortable. And of course, Cam Coleman's got the wingspan of a condor. It's a little easier for him than other guys, but everybody I spoke to said the same thing, though. It wasn't just Cam. Everybody is very confident in what Deuce had done and that they're getting the ball vertical and they're throwing the football around, and it's not just hitting the dirt. Early in spring, and sometimes it can go sideways at any program. So I was surprised by that in a happy way, because if they're doing it during the beginning of spring ball, by the beginning of fall camp, because you're going to work all the way through summer camp and all that stuff, they should be in a pretty good spot. And all those games that they lost that were close over the last couple of years, one or two more passes changes the final score.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, again, they're hitting the long ball. That matters.
It does matter, especially with these weapons that you have outside. It absolutely matters. Whenever you hear, whether it's people within the program or teammates talk about a freshman quarterback, it's usually a compliment coupled with, but he has to adapt, but 100%. He needs time, or he's raw. I mean, that's what we heard with Walker last year, where it's like, yeah, he'll make a throw, and then, it's like, he needs time to adjust to the speed. You're not really hearing that second part with Deuce as much as you have with other freshmen so far. I
actually added on to a conversation when somebody said that he's playing really well, blah, blah, blah. And I said, he's a freshman. I don't expect it. And Deuce hadn't got there yet. And he's like, no, I think he could contribute at some point this year if he had to. And I was like, wow. That's great. I'm like, I don't like freshman quarterbacks playing in any league, and for all the obvious reasons. But if he's making the plays and he's understanding the playbook, that's usually the two reasons that you don't, then it's a different deal. Plus, Auburn's offense is RPO based, and he's run it before.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's running the 1988 49ers offense, which was like the New York phone book, because it's West Coast. It's a lot easier in that regard. So sometimes it's just what the kids play a little bit. Maybe at worst, I would imagine he'll play some this year and have a package, because I know from just being around Deuce, athletically, you cannot teach what he has.
Yeah.
So if he plays some this year, do not be surprised.
Yeah, that'd be incredible. I think every Auburn fan would be okay with that. I think everyone would be okay with that. All right. What's the latest with Trenton Henderson, and does Auburn have a chance with him? He is a 4-star edge defender. We'll talk about him next in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Where did my voice go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. monarchmoney.com. Brian Smith, host of The Portal. Thank you for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Make Brian's show, The Portal, your second listen of the day. Trenton Henderson from Pensacola, 4-star edge, pretty much across the board. Brian, what's the latest with him? You're muted, my friend.
I thought originally that he would end up at Florida State.
Okay.
But from talking to somebody that's close to that situation, that knows that area very well, Florida State is not the likely destination, and it's much more open. I've also heard from another source that Auburn has made quite the impression on him. as the saying goes, you just never know with recruiting. I thought
Yeah.
he would stay in state, go to Florida State. More than likely, it's, Panhandle kid. But Auburn is definitely in the mix, and he's planning to be at the Big Cat. Now, for those who don't know, Big Cat has changed. It's not late July anymore. That's a dead period.
Yeah,
The NCAA, as it likes to do, changes their dates around all the time. So it's early April. He's supposed to be up. If that happens, then we start trending in a different direction. Like, this is a very, very unique pass rusher. He's a kid that played like receiver tight end earlier in his career. He got bigger. Now he's like 6'4", 225. He's the guy on a basketball court you throw alley-oops to.
Yeah,
so he's a phenomenal athlete. Auburn's got a shot here, and like they're going to get an OB. And if you think about it, I mean, the Panhandle's just an extension of Alabama in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Culturally, he'd be fine. So watch out for the Tigers there. That one is unique. But as you noted, pass rusher, high 4-star guy. He's got plenty of options. This isn't a slam dunk, but Auburn's getting him on campus. That's really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about, I guess through different angles, but we've talked about the second edge or potential edge in Auburn's 2026 class a million times. I mean, Hezekiah Harris is there, but then, Auburn was trending for Tank for a while. Zion Ely came up in conversation. We've talked about a bunch of guys. I mean, could Trenton Henderson be that guy? And do you think Auburn takes more than 2 edges in 2026?
Well, part of that could be with whether or not one guy ends up there or not. Where there's a player, I'm not sure. Jaquez Wilkes, they could end up with. He's from Wadley. It's not that far from Auburn, roughly an hour. Mm-hmm. That's a kid they could sign. Right now, I don't think that's where he'll go, but it's possible. And there are other guys. This is a loaded year, even for Dixie standards, at the edge position, and Auburn's in on a bunch of them. It will come down to the visits, but at the end, I will be surprised if they don't end up with at least 2 really good edges. And if somebody like Trenton Henderson on signing day says, Coach, I want to come to Auburn, you're not going to say no.
Right.
So worst case scenario, you get 2. That's a good place to be in.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Auburn's edge situation now, Kieran Crawford, he's gone after this year. Chris Murray, the transfer from Sam Houston, he's gone after this year. Keldrick, I'd be shocked if he's not prepping for the NFL draft 365 days from now. And so that leaves you with Amaris, Jamonta Waller, Joe Phillips, and Jared Smith. Like, you're going to need bodies. Now, I assume they'll address some of that via the portal in December, but you need a combination. Like, you'll have the spots available.
Yeah, you need at least 2, and depending on how you want to look at it, because, like, again, Falk, there's really no reason to believe he's not leaving. I 100% agree. He's a pass rusher that can play strong side or weak side. Yeah, he's gone.
Auburn's NIL is competitive, but it's not.
It's not the National Football League. So, I get it. But maybe one guy from the portal, if you can get an elite one. If you don't, maybe it's 2 guys. You split that money up. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you need one of the guys you signed this year needs to be able to at least play some. Because if anybody gets hurt, they're pretty quick. They could be on the 2 deep. Just attrition. That's how football works nowadays, because you don't get elite pass rushers as 5th-year seniors. Those guys are gone. Right. It's a hard position to stay up on, so you always got to plan for the worst.
Yep, no doubt. So as far as, who's on your radar for Auburn to pick up and add to the 2026 class, is there anybody that you're kind of looking at saying, okay, this guy could be next?
Next is the hard one. I was actually talking to somebody about that last night. It's hard to figure out for a couple of schools because everybody's getting ready to take a bunch of visits. Let me give you an example. Like, they've had Jordan Thomas on campus before. He might be back for Big Cat. He's a kid out of Bergen Catholic, great program in New Jersey, top corner. There's no way you would say no to him.
Right.
If he comes back a second time, then he's definitely interested. Would you take him? Absolutely. But he's a New Jersey kid. Can you predict that? Not really, but the way Auburn's recruited the East Coast, especially Baltimore, as we always talk about on this show.
Yeah, right.
Anything is possible. I'm curious about it, but Jair Edwards is supposed to be back again. Speaking of St. Francis, that's a kid I could see pop. I've had Aiden Harris here and his brother before. I met him actually at a game at Auburn last year. That's possible. Ohio State is who Auburn's probably battling with the most. He's out of Weddington, North Carolina, just outside of Charlotte. That's a kid they would 100% take. He's an elite defensive lineman. There's so many guys like that. It's going to come down to the next 2 weeks, and we'll find out. If they don't get at least 1 or 2 commitments at Big Cat, I would be surprised. It's April 5th Again, for those that don't know, they've changed the dates.
Yeah.
It's an NCAA deal, so they had to move that stuff around. But I just don't know which ones. That's a good thing because they're in on so many guys.
Yeah.
I really don't care. I'm just glad they're getting them on campus. If I had to pick one, it'd probably be Parker Pritchett, but that's low-hanging fruit. He's a kid that plays at Columbus Carver. He lives 45 minutes to an hour from Auburn's campus. He's an offensive lineman, and as we always say, Auburn's always in the market for O-line based on what they've done in the last 10 years. So that's a kid to watch out for if I had to pick one.
Okay. Well, what about Bralan Womack? Chad Simmons wrote a great article on him on 3. It sounds like, I mean, just the quote, he says there's a little separation between Ohio State and Texas A&M and then Auburn and Florida because they've been here longer. So, like, to me, I mean, it seems like it's down to those 4 based on that quote from Womack, but 5-star safety, right, from the state of Mississippi. And Auburn's done a pretty good job in that state.
This is a great kid. Somebody I got to know last summer at OT7 in the state of Florida. Yeah, he's a great kid. Academically, socially, football, everything, he's 100 mile an hour. His dad keeps him moving around the country, going to events and stuff. He's always active. Ohio State, Texas, Florida, Notre Dame, anybody you can imagine has offered him. Ohio State is the team that I wonder about the most with him because that's who he grew up rooting for. And they get the last visit on June 20th. Auburn gets the June 13th visit. So if he comes back as he's planning to this spring, that's important. The staff has to know, okay, are we really right there with Ohio State? Or where are they? Because it's always hard to beat Ohio State in general, especially coming off a national title.
Yeah.
But he's a Southern kid. So it's a heck of a lot closer to Auburn from Jackson than it is to Columbus, Ohio.
Right.
We'll see where, I mean, that's a huge difference. I'm curious what that ends up being like for him because he's told me before he didn't care about staying in state. And I didn't expect him to, but he's also got a sister that's at Auburn. So that helps. Yeah, and she's an athlete. So I don't know what all is going to happen with that, but the next time he visits is very, very important. But they've been in it with him forever, and they just kept climbing slowly. Like they weren't in his top 5 originally when I spoke with him last summer.
And that's what the staff does. They just kind of hang around. They just kind of hang around and wait everybody out. And then when it's time to put up or shut up, they tend to do it.
I don't really know how else to put it. That's a great way to phrase it. They're consistent.
Yeah.
They're consistent. They've gotten the kids on campus over and over again. And I've even heard you say it, are you a fit for us and are we a fit for you? I think that's what the visits kind of help the kids decide. Like, I don't think they really got to push that much because, you've lived in Auburn and you went to Auburn, but this community is pretty straightforward. You know what you're getting.
Right.
So it's either is or it isn't for you. And Womack's planning to come back again. And like twice. Yeah. So he's already been, he's got another unofficial plus another OB. Auburn is definitely in it.
Yeah. Love to hear that. And that is Bralan Womack, Mississippi, 5-star safety. So keep that name in mind. Yeah. Let's talk about Big Cat and maybe the strategic implications of it being moved up, then with officials being after that. What does that mean? That's all next right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Nissan. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team. Plus the gear wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Excuse me. Welcome back into Locked On Auburn. Final few minutes as Brian Smith, host of The Portal, hangs out with us. So, like you said, Big Cat has been moved up. It is now early April, April 5th? And so, normally this is late July. July's a dead period, as you said. And a lot of the officials are happening in May. So if you're Auburn and you're getting all of these, top recruits coming in on unofficials on the same weekend, I mean, how many are you trying to get to commit on Big Cat? Which last year, that was crazy. Arguably one of the biggest days in recruiting ever for Auburn. And then how much of it are you laying the groundwork for the officials that are coming, just a few weeks later? You're muted again, bud. It sneaks up on us.
I think it's 50-50.
Okay.
One of the things that some teams do is, especially with younger coaches, is they go out and they get kids to commit. They put pressure on them. They'll commit, but it's not whether they commit to you, it's whether they sign in December that really matters. Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of coaches learned their lesson. Freeze has done it a little different. Again, as we talked about in the last segment, they slowly build a relationship and then they let the chips fall where they may.
Right.
And I think that's better. Let's use the situation that we were just talking about with Womack. They've definitely built it over time because, again, they weren't one of his top schools early on. They just were not. But they didn't worry about it. They kept recruiting him, built a relationship. They got him on campus, and he's coming back.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance for him to commit. But, again, more importantly, it's just making sure that everybody they can get that's already committed is on campus, help them recruit. Don't push too hard. They'll have underclassmen on campus. They did that last year too, which is smart. Mm-hmm. And they'll have a lot of different people there having fun. It'll sell itself. And if the kid wants to commit, you're not going to say no. But if they're just having a good time and you're staying in the conversation, that's the bare minimum. There's really no L in this. There's no loss. And they're doing such a good job with the list, in-state, out-of-state. I'm kind of like, okay, they've expanded how they're doing. Like they got some of the kids coming back from Maryland, New Jersey, North Carolina, like all over. And I haven't even seen the underclassmen list yet. That'll probably get sorted out a little bit closer to the day of the actual event. But I expect this to just kind of be for each kid his own thing. There'll be some that want to commit. My strong guess is that whether it's you or somebody else on the staff, they'll be like, are you sure you want to? And why is this the play? Like they don't push in that regard from what I know. Somebody else, maybe Cole Pinkston or Caldwell, one of those guys might have a different take, but to my knowledge, they don't. And it's one of the reasons they don't get themselves in bad spots later on. You're always going to have one or two decommits. I don't care what school you are, especially in the NIL era. But Auburn puts themselves in a pretty good position. And these kind of visits catapult them from spots where nobody thought they were going to get a kid too. Mm-hmm. So this will be a win-win all around.
The staff does such a good job of like creating, I want to say energy or like urgency, excitement about like certain weekends where it's like, I can't as a recruit, I can't miss being at Auburn this weekend. And I don't really know how they do that, but clearly they've done it pretty consistently ever since he's been here. It's been pretty remarkable.
I've asked a few kids about that when I've been on campus, whether it's at a game or an event or whatever, and I run into them.
Yeah.
Jared Smith, et cetera. And everybody just likes hanging out together because they have so many people they know. A lot of it's the in-state kids. Those kids in particular, they all know each other. They play with camps and baseball, basketball, football growing up. But they even have some of that with some of the out-of-state guys. Like some of the kids like Denarius Gray comes up from South Florida. They got kids coming from Baltimore. That's not easy because that's not a car ride. That's a plane. You know what I mean? Like I've driven from Miami to Auburn. It's not fun. Those kids are not doing that in a weekend and coming back. So
you've done it a lot.
Yeah. Let's not talk about that.
Okay.
But it's crazy. But that's showing me that they're selling something that they want to be around. And you've got to entertain teenagers. I was at Big Cat last weekend. Last year. That's the first time I'd seen it. The food, the games and all that stuff. Everybody was just happy.
Yeah.
Everybody was chill. And all the people at the media come in and just kind of hang out in the foyer. It's great. So I've never seen an environment quite like that. And again, it'll just kind of help build what you're talking about into the fall when the kids come back for the unofficial visits on home days.
Yeah.
It's
I remember you reaching out to me after you were leaving Big Cat last year and you were like, I've covered recruiting for a long time and I've never seen anything like that.
No, I haven't. I mean, I've been Notre Dame, Miami, Southern Cal. I've been all over the place and what you see unofficial visit, like crazy lists, but the way they did it and how it worked, I'd never seen anything like that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Brian, how can people check out everything that you've got going on?
Locked on the portal. We are a very, very aggressive recruiting site. That's probably the best way to put it. NIL, transfer portal, and recruiting, your daily source. Find us all over the networks, whether it's Spotify, Apple, YouTube. You can get us the same place you find Zach here on Locked On Auburn.
That's right.
Locked On the portal.
Yep. Be sure to check it out. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And thank you for hanging with me, for me losing my voice. Hopefully we're better tomorrow. We'll see you then. This has been Locked On Auburn.